Arizona and New Mexico. On top. When I first lived in Arizona, the White Mountain was a horseman's world. Except along a few main routes, it was too rough for wagons. There were no cars. It was too big for foot travel. Even sheep herders rode. Thus, by elimination, the county-sized plateau known as On Top was the exclusive domain of the mounted man. Mounted cowman, mounted sheepman, mounted forest officer, mounted trapper, and those unclassified mountain men of unknown origin and uncertain destination always found on frontiers. It is difficult for this generation to understand this aristocracy of space based upon transport. No such thing existed in the railroad towns 2 days to the north, where you had your choice of travel by shoe leather, burro, cow horse, buckboard, freight wagon, caboose, or Pullman. Each of these modes of movement corresponded to a social caste, the members of which spoke a distinctive vernacular, wore distinctive clothes, ate distinctive food, and patronized different saloons. Their only common denominator was a democracy of debt to the general store and a communal wealth of Arizona dust and Arizona sunshine. As one proceeded southward, across the plains and mesas toward the White Mountain, these castes dropped out one by one on their respective modes of travel as their respective modes of travel became impossible, until finally, on top, the horsemen ruled the world. Henry Ford's revolution had, of course, abolished all this. Today, the plain has given even the sky to Tom, Dick, and Harry. In winter, on top of the mountain was denied even to horsemen, for the snow piled deep on the high meadows and the little canyon upon which the only trails ascended drifted full to the brim. In May, every canyon roared with an icy torrent, but soon thereafter you could top out if your horse had the heart to climb half a day through knee-deep mud. In the little village at the foot of the mountain there existed each spring a tacit competition to be the first rider to invade the high solitudes. Many of us tried it for reasons we did not stop to analyze. Rumor ran fast. Whoever did it first wore a kind of horseman's halo. He was Man of the Year. The mountain spring, storybooks to the contrary notwithstanding, did not come with a rush. Balmy days alternated with bitter winds, even after the sheep had gone up. I have seen few colder sights than a drab gray mountain meadow, sprinkled with complaining ewes and half-frozen lambs, pelted by hail and snow. Even the gay nutcrackers humped their backs to these spring storms. The mountain in summer had as many moods as there were days and weathers. The dullest rider, as well as his horse, felt these moods to the marrow of his bones. On a fair morning, the mountain invited you to get down and roll in its new grass and flowers. Your less inhabited horse did just this if you failed to keep a tight rein. Every living thing sang, chirped, and burgeoned. Massive pines and firs, storm-tossed these many months, soaked up the sun in towering dignity. Tassel-eared squirrels, poker-faced but exuding emotion with with voice and tail, told you insistently what you already knew full well, that never had there been so rare a day or so rich a solitude to spend it in. An hour later, thunderheads may have blotted out the sun, while your erstwhile paradise cowered under the impending lash of lightning, rain, and hail. Black gloom hung poised, as over a bomb with the fuse lighted. Your horse jumped at every rolling pebble, every crackling twig. When you turned in the saddle to unlash your slicker, he shied, snorted, and trembled, as if you were about to unfurl the scroll of an apocalypse. When I hear anyone say he does not fear lightning, I still remark inwardly, he has never ridden the mountain in July. The explosions are fearsome enough, but more so are the smoking slivers of stone that sing past your ear when the bolt crashes into the rimrock. Still more so are the splinters that fly when a bolt explodes upon. I remember one gleaming white one, 15 feet long, that stabbed deep into the earth at my feet and stood there humming like a tuning fork. It must be poor life that achieves freedom from fear. The top of the mountain was a great meadow, half a day's ride across, but do not picture it as a single amphitheater of grass, hedged in by a wall of pines. The edges of that meadow were scrolled, curled, and crenulated with an infantry of bays and coves, points and stringers, peninsulas and parks, each one of which differed from all the rest. No man knew them all, and every day's ride offered a gambler's chance of finding a new one. I say new because one often had the feeling, riding into some flower-spangled cove, that if anyone had ever been here before, he must of necessity have sung a song or written a poem. This feeling of having this day discovered the incredible accounts, perhaps, for the profusion of initials, dates, and cattle brands inscribed on the patient bark of aspens at every mountain campsite. In these inscriptions one could, in any day, read the history of Homo textimus and his culture. Not in the cold categories of anthropology, but in terms of the individual career of some founding father whose initials you recognized as the man whose son bested you at horse trading, or whose daughter you once danced with. Here, dated in the 90s, was the simple initial, without brand, inscribed no doubt when he first arrived alone on the mountain as an itinerant cowpuncher. Next, a decade later, his initials plus brand. By that time, he had become a solid citizen with an outfit acquired by thrift, natural increase, and perhaps a nimble rope. Next, only a few years old, you found his daughter's initials, inscribed by some enamored youth aspiring not only to the lady's hand, but to the economic succession. The old man was dead now, in his later years. His heart had thrilled only to his bank account and to the tally of his flocks and herds, but the aspen revealed that in his youth he too had felt the glory of the mountain spring. The history of the mountain was written not only in aspen bark, but in its place names. Cow country place names are lewd, humorous, iconic, or sentimental, but seldom trite. Usually they are subtle enough to draw inquiry from new arrivals, whereby hangs that web of tales which, full spun, constitutes the local folklore. For example, there was the Boneyard, a lovely meadow where bluebells arched over the half-buried skulls and scattered vertebrae of cows long since dead. Here in the 1880s, a foolish cowman, newly arrived from the warm valleys of Texas, had trusted the allurements of the mountain summer and essayed to winter his herd on mountain hay. When the November storms hit, he and his horse had floundered out, but not his cows. Again, there was the Campbell Blue, a headwater of the Blue River, to which an early cowman had brought himself a bride. The lady, tiring of rocks and trees, had yearned for a piano. A piano was duly fetched, a Campbell piano. There was only one mule in the county capable of packing it, and only one packer capable of the almost superhuman task of balancing such a load. But the piano failed to bring contentment. The lady decamped, and when the story was told me, the ranch cabin was already a ruin of sagging logs. Again, there was the Frijole Cienega, a marshy meadow walled in by pines, under which stood in my day a small log cabin used by any passer-by as an overnight camp. It was the unwritten law for the owner of such real estate to leave flour, lard, and beans, and for the passer-by to replenish such stock as he could. But one luckless traveler, trapped there for a week by storms, had found only beans. This breach of hospitality was sufficiently notable to be handed down to history as a place name. Finally, there was Paradise Ranch, an obvious platitude when read from a map, but something quite different when you arrived there at the end of a hard ride. It lay tucked away on the far side of a high peak, as any proper paradise should. Through its verdant meadows meandered a singing trout stream. A horse left for a month on this meadow whacked so fat that rainwater gathered in a pool on his back. After my first visit to Paradise Ranch, I remarked to myself, what else could you call it? Despite several opportunities to do so, I have never returned to the White Mountain. I prefer not to see what tourists, roads, sawmills, and logging railroads have done for it, or to it. I hear young people, not yet born when I first ride out on top, exclaim about it as a wonderful place. To this, with an unspoken mental reservation, I agree. Thinking like a mountain. A deep chesty bawl echoes from rimrock to rimrock, rolls down the mountain and fades into the far blackness of the night. It is an outburst of wild, defiant sorrow and of contempt for all the adversities of the world. Every living thing, and perhaps many a dead one as well, pay heed to that call. To the deer it is a reminder of the way of all flesh. To the pine a forecast of midnight scuffles and of blood upon snow. To the coyote a promise of gleanings to come. To the cowman a thread of red ink at the bank. To the hunter a challenge of fang against bullet. Yet behind these obvious and immediate hopes and fears there lies a deeper meaning, known only to the mountain itself. Only the mountain has lived long enough to listen objectively to the howl of a wolf. Those unable to decipher the hidden meaning know nevertheless that it is there, for it is felt in all wolf country, and distinguishes that country from all other land. It tingles in the spine of all who hear wolves at night, or who scan their tracks by day. Even without sight or sound of wolf, it is implicit in 100 small events. The midnight whinny of a pack horse, the rattle of rolling rocks, the bound of a fleeing deer, the way shadows lie under the spruces. Only the ineducable tyro can fail to sense the presence or absence of wolves. Ineducable tyro. Or the fact that mountains have a secret opinion about them. My own conviction on this score dates from the day I saw a wolf die. We were eating lunch on a high rimrock, at the foot of which a turbulent river elbowed this way. We saw what we thought was a doe fording the torrent, her breast awash in white water. When she climbed the bank toward us and shook out her tail, we realized our error. It was a wolf. A half-dozen others, evidently grown pups, sprang from the willows and all joined in a welcoming melee of wagging tails and playful maulings. What was literally a pile of wolves writhed and tumbled in the center of an open flat at the foot of our rimrock. In those days we had never heard of passing up a chance to kill a wolf. In a second we were pumping lead into the pack, but with more excitement than accuracy. How to aim a steep downhill shot is always confusing. When our rifles were empty, the old wolf was down, and a pup was dragging a leg into impassable slide rocks. We reached the old wolf in time to watch a fierce green fire dying in her eyes. I realized then, and have known ever since, that there was something new to me in those eyes, something known only to her and to the mountain. I was young then, and full of trigger itch. I thought that because fewer wolves meant more deer, that no wolves would mean hunter's paradise. But after seeing the green fire die, I sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agree with such a view. Since then, I have seen state after state extirpate its wolves. I have watched the face of many a newly wolfless mountain, and seen the south-facing slopes wrinkle with a maze of new deer trails. I have seen every edible bush and seedling browsed, first to anemic desuetude and then to death. I have seen every edible tree defoliated to the height of a saddlehorn. Such a mountain looks as if someone had given God a new pruning shears and forbidden him all other exercise. In the end, the starved bones of the hoped-for deer herd, dead of its own too much, bleach with the bones of the dead sage or molder under the high-lying junipers. I now suspect that just as the deer herd lives in mortal fear of its wolves, so does the mountain live in mortal fear of its deer. And perhaps with better cause, for while a buck pulled down by wolves can be replaced in 2 or 3 years, a range pulled down by too many deer may fail of replacement in as many decades. So also with cows. The cowman who cleans his range of wolves does not realize that he is taking over the wolf's job of trimming the herd to fit the range. He has not learned to think like a mountain. Hence, we have dust bowls and rivers washing the future into the sea. We all strive for safety, prosperity, comfort, long life, and dullness. The deer strives with his supple legs, the cowman with trap and poison, the statesman with pen, the most of us with machines, votes, and dollars. But it all comes to the same thing: peace in our time. A measure of success in this is all well enough, and perhaps it is requisite to objective thinking. But too much safety seems to yield only danger in the long run. Perhaps this is behind Thoreau's dictum, "In wildness is the salvation of the world." Perhaps this is a hidden meaning in the howl of the wolf, long known among mountains, but seldom perceived among men. Escudilla. Life in Arizona was bounded underfoot by grama grass, overhead by sky, and on the horizon by escudilla. To the north of the mountain you rode on honey-colored plains. Look up anywhere, any time, and you saw escudilla. To the east you rode over a confusion of wooded mesas. Each hollow seemed its own small world, soaked in sun, fragrant with juniper, and cozy with the chatter of pinion jays. But tap out on a ridge, and you see at once become a speck in an immensity. On its edge hung escudilla. To the south lay the ranged canyons of Blue River, full of whitetails, wild turkeys, and wilder cattle. When you missed a saucy buck waving his goodbye over the skyline and looked down your sights to wonder why, you looked at the fat blue mountain, escudilla. To the west, below the outliers of the Apache National Forest, we cruised timber there, converting the tall pines 40 by 40 into notebook figures representing hypothetical lumber piles. Panting up a canyon, the cruiser felt a curious incongruity between the remoteness of his notebook symbols and the immediacy of sweaty fingers, locust thorns, deer fly bites, and scolding squirrels. But on the next ridge, a cold wind, roaring across a green sea of pines, blew his doubts away. On the far shore hung escudilla. The mountain bounded not only our work and our play, but even our attempts to get a good dinner. On winter evenings, we often tried to ambush a mallard on the river flats. The wary flock circled the rosy west, the steel blue north, and then disappeared into the inky black of escudilla. If they reappeared on set wings, he had a fat drake for the Dutch oven. If they failed to reappear, it was bacon and beans again. There was, in fact, only one place from which you did not see escudilla on the skyline. That was the top of escudilla itself. Up there you could not see the mountain, but you could feel it. The reason was the big bear. Old Bigfoot was a robber baron, and escudilla was his castle. Each spring, when the warm winds had softened the shadows on the snow, The old grizzly crawled out of his hibernation den in the rock slides and, descending the mountain, bashed in his head of a cow. Eating his fill, he climbed back to his crags, and there summered peaceably on marmots, cronies, berries, and roots. I once saw one of his kills. The cow's skull and neck were pulp, as if he had collided head-on with a fast freight. No one ever saw the old bear, but in the muddy springs about the base of the cliffs you saw his incredible tracks. Seeing them made the most hard-bitten cowboys aware of bear. Wherever they rode, they saw the mountain, and when they saw the mountain, they thought of bear. Campfire conversation ran on beef, bias, and bear. Bigfoot claimed for his own only a cow a year, and a few square miles of useless rocks. But his personality pervaded the county. Those were the days when Progress first came to the cow mountain, cow country. Progress had various emissaries. One was the first transcontinental automobilist. The cowboys understood this breaker of roads. He talked the same breezy bravado as any breaker of bronchos. They did not understand, but they listened to and looked at the pretty lady in black velvet who came to enlighten them, in a Boston accent, about woman's suffrage. They marveled, too, at the telephone engineer who strung wires on the junipers and brought instantaneous messages from town. An old man asked whether the wire could bring him a side of bacon. One spring, Progress set still another emissary, a government trapper, a sort of St. George in overalls, seeking dragons to slay at government expense. Were there, he asked, any destructive animals in need of slaying? Yes, there was the big bear. The trapper packed his mule and headed for Escadilla. In a month he was back, his mule staggering under a heavy hide. There was only one barn in town big enough to dry it on. He had tried traps, poison, and all his usual wiles to no avail. There he had erected a set gun in a defile through which only the bear could pass, and waited. The last grizzly walked into the string and shot himself. It was June. The pelt was foul, patchy, and worthless. It seemed to us rather an insult to deny the last grizzly the chance to leave a good pelt as a memorial to his race. All he left was a skull in the National Museum, and a quarrel among scientists over the Latin name of the skull. It was only after we pondered on these things that we began to wonder who wrote the rules for progress. Since the beginning, time has gnawed at the basaltic hulk of Escadilla, wasting, waiting, and building. Time built three things on the old mountain: a venerable aspect, a community of minor animals and plants, and a grizzly. The government trapper who took the grizzly knew he had made Escadilla safe for cows. He did not know he had toppled a spire off an edifice building since the morning stars sang together. The bureau chief who sent the trapper was a biologist versed in the architecture of evolution, but he did not know that spires might be as important as cows. He did not foresee that within 2 decades the cow country would become tourist country, and as such have greater need of bears than of beefsteaks. The congressmen who voted money to clear the ranges of bears were the sons of pioneers. They acclaimed the superior virtues of the frontiersmen, but they strove with might and main to make an end of the frontier. We forest officers, who acquiesced in the extinguishment of the bear, knew a local rancher who had plowed up a dagger engraved with the name of one of Colorado's captains. We spoke harshly of the Spaniards who, in their zeal for gold and converts, had needlessly extinguished the native Indians. It did not occur to us that we, too, were the captains of an invasion too sure of its own righteousness. Escadilla still hangs on the horizon. But when you see it, you no longer think of bear. It is only a mountain now.